A decisive battle in the Southern campaign of the American Revolution, Guilford Courthouse was the site of a brutal skirmish in what is today Greensboro, North Carolina. General Charles Cornwallis suffered a Pyrrhic victory over General Nathanael Greene, although Cornwallis's race to the Dan proved to be rather unsuccessful at the hands of the Continentals and the Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina militias. The British had relied upon Loyalist sentiment and aid in the South prior to arriving in North Carolina. Cornwallis had heavily recruited in the colony upon entry, calling on all loyal citizens of the Crown to help in the fight against the tyrannical and rebellious Americans. Both infantries had endured long and arduous journeys in the months and years prior to March of 1781. As mentioned earlier, Cornwallis and some in the British military hierarchy held the belief that Loyalist sentiment was rabid in the South, and offensive strategies to keep the Americans on the run were implemented in an effort to exhaust all means of supply and to deplete rebellious morale. The British underestimated the amount of revolutionary support, as well as the dedication and perseverance held by the local militias of the colonies. After maintaining supply lines throughout Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, Greene's forces strengthened and prepared for defense. Greene sought to retreat towards the Dan River near what is now Greensboro and northern North Carolina. This strategy would strand Cornwallis some hundreds of miles from his arsenals and resupplying centers, which had been set up after major British victories in Charleston and Camden, South Carolina. Greene, as noted in Babbitt and Howard's book, Long, Obstinate, and Bloody, The Battle of Guilford Courthouse, placed militias in the woods along New Garden Road, leading into the small hamlet with 3 lines of defense in depth to repel the initial British offensive. Regiments from Virginia and Maryland would bear the largest brunt of the British force before Greene called for withdrawal, albeit at the heavy cost of life. The result of the battle, the geographical isolation, and the loss of life on a single day, persuaded Cornwallis to relocate his efforts from chasing Greene and the rebels throughout North Carolina, north to Virginia, where his famous surrender at Yorktown would occur some 6 months later. The road to Yorktown truly began at Guilford Courthouse. The site today sits in the northwestern suburbs of Greensboro, wherein hundreds of thousands of visitors every year come to admire the history and ambiance of a place where Southern and Mid-Atlantic patriots took a fateful stand in defense of their homeland. The Guilford Battleground Company, along with the American Battlefield Trust, helped to maintain the authenticity of the grounds. The entire property itself has been a National Historic Landmark since 2001 and has been under the supervision of the National Park Service since the 1930s. Initially, the location of the battle stayed as is without caretaking or maintenance until a Civil War veteran, Judge David Schenck, purchased the land in the 1880s with the ambition of preserving its importance in American history, creating the Guilford Battleground Company Incorporates in 1887. In the years after, monuments were erected of Nathanael Greene as well as other North Carolina Revolutionary heroes, and annual celebrations were held. In more modern times, as the city of Greensboro vastly expanded, the fight to preserve the sacred land has come under threat of urban development and commercialization. Yet with the American Battlefield Trust and the new Guilford Battleground Company involved since the 1980s, the grounds of the military park have been protected and preserved in remembrance for American independence. A field trip to where this pivotal battle took place would be well served for anybody truly interested in the Revolutionary War. Guilford Courthouse to this day still represents a climactic moment in the formulation of this country and should be revered by all Americans in understanding just how important the dedication and sacrifice displayed on March 15, 1781 still affects us today.
If you had been standing, Chris, right where we are today, and you'd walked out that front door, and if you'd looked off to your left, down towards that busy intersection now, where all the cars are, you would have seen 2,000 of the finest troops in the British Army coming up that hill with glory on their mind. If you look to your right, up the hill, about 300 yards, you would have seen a split rail fence with about 1,000, 2,000 militia immediately behind it. And that was the first line. They were mostly North Carolina militia. And in between, right where you're standing today, that battle took place. And that battle, they didn't know it at that time, but 2.5 hours later, when it ended up near the courthouse, about a mile and a half that away, that battle was the Battle of North Carolina during the Revolutionary War. And it decided once and for all that this state was going to be free of British rule.